I was standing in the rain when I saw it, a crumpled hotel keycard peeking out of her purse like some careless secret begging to be found. I hadn't meant to snoop, I swear. I just went to grab her charger because mine was busted and we were late for work again. But when I picked up her bag and that little plastic rectangle slid out and hit the floor, something in my chest cracked open, not like a shatter, no, more like a slow splintering that starts deep and moves outwards until you can't breathe without feeling it. I held the keycard in my hand, my thumb brushing over the worn numbers, room 218, and I remember standing there for what felt like forever, staring at that little piece of plastic like it was a loaded gun, the kind that doesn't go off right away but waits until you've turned your back, smiled, kissed her cheek and said, "See you tonight," before it sinks into your ribs and leaves you bleeding from the inside out. She came in then, hair still wet from the shower, wrapped in one of my old hoodies like she always did when she was trying to be sweet, or hide something. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could think was, God, she saved me once, she pulled me out of a hole so dark I thought I'd never crawl back, and now I was standing here, holding a piece of evidence that maybe I never really left that hole at all. "Hey, babe, what are you looking for?" she asked, her voice light, casual, like we weren't teetering on the edge of something massive, like she hadn't just left a lie sitting there for me to trip over. I didn't know what to say, not then, so I slipped the keycard into my back pocket and smiled, the kind of smile that hurts your teeth, and told her I found the charger, told her we'd better get going if we didn't want to hit traffic, and she leaned up to kiss my cheek, humming some song under her breath, completely unaware that everything was about to change. You ever feel like you've been living in a dream, and suddenly someone flips on the lights and you see the roaches scatter? That's what it felt like, walking out of that apartment with her hand in mine, pretending like everything was still intact when deep down I knew we were already in pieces. Let me rewind a little though, because you need to understand how we got here, how I got here, how a guy who used to have a decent job, a little condo, friends to call on the weekends, and a future he actually looked forward to, ended up living in a beat-up Honda Civic with a broken window and a dog-eared copy of The Alchemist for company. It started 2 years ago, maybe a little more. I lost my job during one of those mass layoffs that companies try to spin as strategic restructuring, as if that makes losing your livelihood any less painful. I thought I'd bounce back fast, I really did, but months went by and nothing came through. Bills piled up like bricks on my chest, and before I knew it, I was out of the condo, couch hopping at first, then staying in my car when the couches ran out. I tried not to let it break me, but it did, slowly, quietly, the way a leaky faucet wears down stone over time. There were nights I parked in grocery store lots, kept the windows cracked just enough to breathe, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline, waiting for a call that never came. Sometimes I'd cry, sometimes I'd just stare at the ceiling of my car and wonder how the hell it all went sideways so fast. And then came her. I met Kara at a diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that always smelled like bacon and burnt coffee. She was sitting 2 booths over, typing something on her laptop with this look of fierce concentration, and when our eyes met, she smiled, not politely, but like she saw me, really saw me, like I wasn't just some scruffy, jobless guy trying to make $5 stretch for breakfast. We started talking that day. I told her a little about myself, left out the car part, and she told me she ran her own marketing business, that she'd gone through hell herself and knew what it was like to rebuild from the ashes, and the crazy thing is, she offered to help me, just like that, no strings, no weird conditions, just help. I didn't trust it at first, of course I didn't. Kindness like that usually has claws, but Kara was different. She gave me work, helped me fix up my resume, even let me crash on her couch when she found out I was sleeping in my car, and over time, what started as gratitude turned into something else, something warmer, scarier, more fragile. We fell for each other in that slow, inevitable way people do when they've both been broken and are just grateful to find someone who knows how the pieces fit. She told me I gave her hope again, that she saw a future with me, and I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. Fast forward to now, and I'm working 2 jobs, day shifts at a warehouse and nights bartending at this dive near the river. I barely sleep, barely eat, but I keep pushing because we talked about buying a house, about starting fresh somewhere quieter, where no one knew our stories, where we could build something clean from all the mess we'd survived. But now, that keycard, that tiny crack in the story she told me, it's all I can think about. It follows me like a shadow, even when I'm laughing with her, even when we're making dinner or watching bad reality TV. I see that room number every time I close my eyes, 218, like a countdown, like a warning. I couldn't ask her, not yet, not until I knew, because if I asked and she lied, I'd never be able to believe her again, and if she told the truth, I might not be able to forgive it. Either way, everything we had would change, maybe disappear entirely. So I did something I'm not proud of. I called in sick to the bar, waited until she said she had a networking dinner, and I followed her. I hate saying that, I hate what it makes me sound like, but I had to know, I had to, because the uncertainty was eating me alive, and I swear to you, part of me hoped she'd just go to some restaurant, meet a client, smile too much and come home with nothing more than a receipt and a story about boring investors. But she didn't. She pulled into the parking lot of a low-rise hotel just outside the city limits, the kind of place people go when they want to disappear for a few hours, and she went in alone, but 10 minutes later. A man followed, tall, dressed sharp, confident, and when I saw his face under the fluorescent lights, my blood turned to ice. It was her ex. The one she said was out of her life for good, the one who tore her apart, who never wanted the same things, the one she swore she hadn't spoken to in over a year. And they were together, in that hotel, behind that door, room 218. I sat in my car across the lot and watched that door like it owed me answers, and for hours, I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, just waited for something to make sense, to explain how the woman who saved me could betray me like this. But what came next made everything worse. Because when they finally left, I followed them again, not far, just enough to see where they'd go, and that's when I saw it. Her ex was holding a child, a little girl, maybe 4, maybe 5, and she had Kara's eyes. That was the moment my world cracked open completely. Because it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about lies that stretched back years, and a child I never knew existed. And suddenly, I wasn't just a man trying to save his future anymore. I was a man standing at the edge of a truth so heavy, it might bury me whole. I don't remember starting the engine. I don't remember pulling out of that lot or the 20 minutes I spent just driving in circles. All I remember is the girl, that little girl with Kara's eyes and a pink jacket that looked 2 sizes too small, holding a stuffed bear by one arm like it had been through hell with her, and the way he, her ex, buckled her into the back seat of his SUV like it was second nature, like he'd done it 100 times before. I pulled over eventually, some forgotten street downtown where the neon signs flickered like they were embarrassed to still be open, and I just sat there with my head in my hands, trying to breathe through the 1,000 questions stabbing at the back of my throat. Who was she, really? Why hadn't Kara ever told me she had a child? And why, in God's name, was that child not with her? I thought about the nights Kara told me she was working late, the weekends she said she needed time to focus on her clients, and suddenly all those empty spaces in her story filled up with possibilities I wasn't ready to face. I thought I knew her, I trusted her, gave her everything I had left, even the parts of me I thought were too damaged to share. And now I didn't even know what kind of person she really was. I didn't sleep that night. I drove until the sun came up, then I went home, our home, and stood outside the door for almost 10 minutes before I had the nerve to walk in like nothing had changed, like I wasn't holding her secrets in my mouth like broken glass. She was in the kitchen, humming, pouring coffee, wearing that faded t-shirt I used to love on her, and for a second I almost believed the illusion again, almost let myself fall back into the dream she built around us. But I couldn't do it, not anymore. You ever gonna tell me about him? I asked, my voice lower than I meant it to be, almost a growl. She froze, mid-pour, the coffee overflowing the cup and spilling onto the counter, her hand shaking just enough for me to notice. What? She said, too fast, too light, her back still to me like she thought she could hide from it. Your ex, I said, stepping into the room, the one you were with last night, at the hotel, room 218. Her breath hitched so loud it felt like it echoed, and for a second, I swear she almost dropped the mug. I followed you, I said, before she could start lying. I saw you, Kara, and I saw the kid, too. She turned around then, and I saw it, fear, guilt, something raw that she'd never shown me before, and for a second I thought maybe she'd finally be honest. You shouldn't have followed me, she said quietly, her voice not angry, not defensive, just tired. I shouldn't have had to, I snapped. You told me he was gone, out of your life. You never said anything about a child, your child. Kara, what the hell is going on? She looked down at her hands, rubbing at a coffee stain on her wrist like it might make the words come easier. Her name is Ava, she said after a long pause. She's 5, she was born right before everything fell apart between me and Caleb. Caleb, I repeated, the name tasting bitter in my mouth. So he's the father? Yes, she said, barely above a whisper. And you just, what? Left her with him? Never thought to mention that your daughter is out there somewhere while we're here playing house like none of this matters. I didn't leave her, she said quickly, finally looking at me, eyes wide, pleading. It wasn't like that, it was complicated. No, I cut her off. No more, it's complicated. Kara, this isn't some client you forgot to email back. This is a kid, your kid, and you let me build a life with you while hiding this gigantic piece of who you are. I was trying to protect her, she said, her voice shaking now, and myself, and you. I didn't know how to explain it without everything falling apart. Too late, I muttered, walking past her, pacing now because I couldn't sit still, couldn't breathe with all this inside me. You want to protect her. Then why is she with him? Why not with us? Why not at home with her mother? She didn't answer right away, just stared at the floor like the truth was too heavy to say out loud. I gave up custody, she finally said, and my heart sank like a stone in my chest. 2 years ago. I was building my business, barely surviving, and Caleb, he had the money, the space, the support. I didn't think I could do it, I didn't think I could be what she needed. You didn't think to tell me? I asked, my voice breaking now, raw and ragged. You didn't think I had the right to know that the woman I've been killing myself for, working 2 jobs for, once gave up her own child for the sake of a business pitch? She flinched, tears finally rising in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her, not yet, maybe not ever. I was going to, she said, every time I tried, I got scared, I didn't want to lose what we had. You were the only good thing in my life, and I was afraid if you knew the whole truth, you'd leave. You were right, I said coldly, and that, more than anything, seemed to hit her like a slap. She stumbled back a little, leaning on the counter, mouth open like she wanted to say something that would undo everything, but nothing came, just silence. And in that silence, something inside me cracked, not all at once, but slowly, like a foundation giving out under too much weight. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, and I walked out, her voice following me down the hall. Wait, please, just let me explain, let's talk. But I didn't stop, didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I might stay, and staying would break me in ways I wasn't sure I could recover from. I drove until I found myself at the edge of the city, near a park I hadn't seen in years, and I sat on the same bench I used to sleep on when I had nothing, when I was no one, and I looked out at the water, trying to remember what it felt like to trust someone. And then I thought of Ava, that little girl who didn't ask to be born into any of this, who was just trying to hold onto her stuffed bear while the adults around her made decisions they couldn't undo. Was it fair to blame Kara for everything? Or was this just life, messy and cruel and full of broken people doing the best they could? I didn't know. All I knew was that everything I believed about my life had just been shattered. And I didn't know if I could put it back together again. But somehow, I had to try. Because now it wasn't just about love, or betrayal, or lies. It was about what kind of man I wanted to be, now that I'd seen what kind of man I was when the truth finally came to light. I spent the next 2 nights in my car again, not because I didn't have anywhere else to go, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to be alone, really alone, without anyone to answer to or lie to or disappoint. The city sounds felt different now, like they were whispering things I didn't want to hear, things like you were never enough for her, she never really chose you. You were just a soft place to land until she got her real life back. I didn't answer her calls, didn't read the texts she kept sending. I could see her name flash on the screen and feel my heart jump, but I'd let it ring, let the silence stretch between us like it could protect me from the truth, but deep down I knew I couldn't outrun it, not forever. And I couldn't stop thinking about Ava. That little girl didn't ask for any of this, didn't get to choose which parent she lived with or who disappeared from her life and why. She didn't get a vote in her mother's ambition or her father's forgiveness, and yet here she was, right in the middle of a story that started long before she knew how to spell her name. I kept seeing her in my head, those wide, curious eyes, the way she reached for Caleb without hesitation, how he bent to scoop her up like it was the most natural thing in the world, and it hurt in a way I couldn't explain because it wasn't jealousy, not exactly, it was grief for something I never had, and maybe never could have. On the 3rd day, I drove to the office and quit my second job, walked into that greasy little diner where I'd spent countless nights wiping tables and hauling boxes, and told my boss I couldn't do it anymore. He looked at me like I'd just told him the moon was falling, but he didn't argue. Maybe he saw something in my face that said it wasn't up for debate. I needed time, not just from Kara, but from everything, from the grind I'd forced myself into for the sake of a future that might have been built on a lie. I didn't know where to go next, so I ended up outside a school I didn't recognize, one of those fancy private academies on the north side, the kind of place where tuition cost more than a year of my rent used to be. I don't know why I was there until I saw her, Ava, coming out of the gate, holding a little art project in her hands, a painted paper plate with stars and glitter glued on like it meant something big. She laughed when she saw Caleb, who was waiting just outside his car, and she ran to him like she hadn't seen him in years, even though it had probably only been a few hours. I stayed hidden across the street, behind the wheel, just watching. Something about it felt wrong, maybe even cruel, but I couldn't stop myself. He knelt to her level, asked about her project, ruffled her hair the way I imagined a good dad would, and I saw something in his eyes I wasn't expecting. Love. Not fake, not for show, not the smug kind I thought I'd find there. Real, honest-to-God fatherly love. And that broke me all over again. Because how do you hate a man who clearly loves his child more than anything in the world? How do you hate someone who's just doing what you said you would do, what you thought Kara wanted you to do, protect her, give her a future, build something solid and lasting? And the truth was, he was doing that. I left before they saw me, hand shaking on the steering wheel like I'd touched something radioactive. I needed answers, not from her, not from him, but from me. I needed to know what the hell I was trying to hold onto and why. I ended up back at Kara's, not to make peace, not to fall into her arms like I used to, but because the questions were too loud now and I couldn't carry them alone anymore. She opened the door like she'd been standing behind it for hours, eyes swollen, wearing the same hoodie I left her in days ago, and the second she saw me she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since the moment I walked out. "I didn't think you'd come back," she whispered. "I didn't either," I said, walking past her into the living room. It felt smaller now, like the air had collapsed in on itself. We sat, not too close, not touching, like there was a battlefield between us and we both knew where the mines were buried. "I saw her," I said quietly, "outside school, with him." Kara didn't flinch, just looked down at her hands, fingers twisting in her lap. "She looked happy," I added, and for a second I thought I saw pride flicker in Kara's eyes, followed by something darker, regret maybe, or shame. "She is," she said. "Caleb's a good father, whatever else happened between us, he's always been good to her." "So why the hotel?" I asked, my voice rough now. "Why lie? Why go behind my back?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the floor, then finally looked up at me. "I didn't go to meet him," she said. "I went to meet her. He brought her to see me because I asked him to. We've been talking more lately, trying to figure out how to co-parent better, how to, maybe bring her back into my life slowly." I blinked, not expecting that answer, not sure I believed it. "Why not just tell me?" I asked. "Why make it something dirty, something I had to catch you doing?" "Because I didn't know if I deserved her," she said, and the tears came then, slow and silent, like they'd been waiting for the right moment to escape, "and I didn't know if I deserved you either." I looked at her and I saw all of it, the ambition that drove her to give Ava up, the guilt that kept her quiet, the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have both her daughter and a future with me, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel anger. I felt heartbreak. Because this wasn't just betrayal. It was a tragedy. And we were both trying to survive it in our own broken ways. "I need to meet her," I said after a long silence, "not Caleb. Ava. If there's any part of this future left for us, I need to know who she is, not just who you were when you left her behind." Kara nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "Okay," she whispered, "I want that too. But it doesn't mean I'm coming back," I added, and her face fell. "It just means I'm willing to see what's real, not the version of life we were pretending to build." She nodded again, smaller this time, like the hope inside her was fragile and she was scared to breathe too hard. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, "but I'm not done trying to earn it." And for the first time, I believed her. Because this wasn't about perfect people or clean slates. This was about truth. Messy, painful, human truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real love is built on. Not illusions. But the courage to stand in the rubble and ask, what kind of life can we build from here? I thought about what I was going to say to her the whole night before, lying in the back seat of my car again, staring through the glass roof at a sky so dark it almost didn't look real, my mind racing with words that all sounded either too heavy or too light. How do you introduce yourself to a 5-year-old who doesn't know you, who owes you nothing, whose entire world has been built without your name in it? The next morning, I shaved for the first time in days, put on the cleanest shirt I had left in the trunk, and drove to the park where Kara said they'd be waiting. I was early, of course, because I didn't trust myself not to back out at the last minute if I stayed still too long. I needed to be there before my fear caught up with me. When I saw them, Kara sitting on a bench, Ava crouched on the grass nearby, picking wildflowers or weeds or maybe both, I froze. Something about the scene was so peaceful it almost felt sacred, and I wasn't sure if I had the right to step into it. Kara looked up and saw me, smiled that small, nervous smile I hadn't seen since the early days of us, before we lived together, before she knew what kind of broken man I really was, and she waved me over like she was inviting me into something fragile that might break if I moved too fast. I walked slow, my heart pounding in my ears, my hands clammy even though the morning was cool. "Hey," she said softly when I reached her, her eyes searching my face like she was still waiting for me to change my mind. "Hey," I said back, and then I looked down at Ava. She was wearing yellow overalls and pink sneakers that lit up when she moved, her hair in 2 tiny braids that stuck out to the sides, and when she looked up at me, I saw it again, Kara's eyes, big and wide and full of questions she hadn't learned how to ask yet. "This is my friend," Kara said gently, gesturing toward me, "his name is Jake." Ava tilted her head, studying me like she was trying to decide if I was real or part of the game. "Do you like dinosaurs?" she asked seriously, and it caught me so off guard I actually laughed, not out of mockery but relief. "Yeah," I said, crouching a little so I was closer to her level. "Stegosaurus is my favorite, what about you?" She beamed. "Mine is T-Rex, because he's the boss." "Fair enough," I said with a nod, "he definitely walks like he owns the place." Kara chuckled behind us, but she didn't interrupt, didn't try to force anything, and I was grateful for that. Ava held out a flower, or something pretending to be one, and said, "This one's for you." "Thank you," I said, taking it carefully, "that's the nicest thing anyone's given me in a long time." She smiled again and went back to her patch of grass, humming some little tune while she worked, and I stood slowly, my eyes meeting Kara's. "She's incredible," I said quietly, and Kara's face softened. "She is," she said, "I still don't know how I got so lucky with her." We sat on the bench while Ava played, not talking for a while, just watching, the silence between us finally feeling less like punishment and more like space we both needed to fill slowly, honestly. "She asks about me sometimes," Kara said eventually, not directly, but she'll say things like, "Why don't we live in the same house?" or "Why do I have 2 bedrooms and only one mommy?" And I never know what to say. I try to tell her the truth without hurting her, but it always feels like not enough. "She deserves the truth," I said, then paused, "but I get it, you were trying to protect her, and maybe yourself too." Kara nodded, eyes glassy. "I just didn't want to break her the way I broke everything else." "You didn't break her," I said, "you gave her a shot at stability when you didn't have it yourself. That counts for something, Kara." She turned to me then, the weight in her gaze almost too much to hold. "Do you still think there's any future for us?" She asked, no pretense, no games, just the raw, terrifying question hanging in the air between us. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know I'm not ready to walk away yet, not after meeting her, not after seeing the parts of you that I never knew existed." Ava came back over then, interrupting the moment like a perfect reminder that life doesn't wait for emotional clarity. She tugged my sleeve and said, "Want to come see my fairy garden?" And I didn't hesitate. "Lead the way," I said, following her over to a mess of sticks, leaves, and shiny rocks she'd arranged into something magical only kids could truly see. I crouched beside her, pretending to take it all in like it was a museum exhibit, and she talked to me like we'd known each other forever. And for a few minutes, I forgot everything else, the betrayal, the lies, the pain, and just let myself feel what it might be like to belong to something again, to someone. Later, after Ava had been picked up by Caleb and driven back to his place, Kara and I walked back to our cars in silence, the air between us heavy but not tense. "I want to see her again," I said, "if that's okay." Kara looked at me like she'd been holding her breath again, and finally let it out. "Of course," she said, "I'd like that, too." I stopped beside my car, hesitated, then turned back to her. "But we need to rebuild from the ground up, Kara, no more hiding, no more half-truths. If we're going to try again, it has to be real this time." "I know," she said, and for the first time, I believed she meant it. I drove home with the little flower Ava gave me resting on the dashboard, and I realized that maybe this wasn't about starting over. Maybe it was about starting honestly. And that might be even harder. But also, more worth it than anything else I've ever done. A week passed before I saw Ava again, 7 long days of working my remaining job, sleeping in my car when I couldn't stand the silence of my tiny sublet, and thinking too much, way too much, about everything I used to believe about love and family and loyalty, about what made a person good, and how easily we all cross lines we once swore we never would. Kara and I texted a few times, mostly short, careful exchanges about Ava, her school, a few funny things she'd said, but nothing deep, nothing dangerous, like we were both afraid to step on a crack that would shatter whatever fragile ground we were now standing on. And I didn't blame her for being cautious. I was cautious too, because the truth was still raw, still sitting in my chest like something sharp I hadn't figured out how to pull free yet, but something had shifted after that day in the park, after seeing Ava smile and the way she handed me that bent flower like it meant something, and maybe it did, maybe it meant hope. Saturday morning came again, and I met Kara and Ava at a little science museum just outside the city, the kind of place filled with blinking lights and fossil exhibits and interactive setups where kids press buttons just to see what'll happen. Ava ran up to me like we'd known each other for years, grabbed my hand without hesitation, and said, "You're late." I wasn't, not really, but I smiled anyway and said, "Guess I'll have to make it up to you then." She led me through every corner of that building, talking nonstop, telling me which exhibits were cool, and which ones were too boring even for grown-ups, and somewhere between the dinosaur skeletons and the plasma globe, I realized something that both warmed me and scared the hell out of me. I was already falling in love with her. Not in the abstract, not as a concept or a symbol of some life I thought I wanted, but as her, this bright, strange, beautiful little human who somehow made me forget every hurt I'd carried into that building, and I couldn't help but think, what if I lose this too? After the museum, we stopped for ice cream, Kara watching me and Ava like she was trying to memorize the way we laughed together, like she couldn't believe it was real either, and when Ava had chocolate on her nose and giggled so loud people turned to look, I glanced at Kara and for a second, just one, we were back to who we used to be. Not perfect, but possible. Later, once Ava was back with Caleb again, Kara and I sat in my car outside her building, and for the first time since everything fell apart, we talked like adults, not enemies or exes or strangers pretending not to be hurt. "I know I messed everything up," she said, her voice low but steady, "and I know I said that before, but this time I don't want to just say it, I want to fix it, if that's even still on the table." I stared out the windshield for a long moment, thinking about how many nights I'd spent here, parked under this very streetlight, wondering how the hell I'd let my life become this mess. "You know what's funny?" I said quietly, "All the time I spent working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, I thought I was proving something to you, like if I just worked hard enough, you'd see me as stable, reliable, a man worth choosing." "I did see you that way," she said softly, "I do." "Then why lie?" I asked, finally turning to face her. "Why sneak around to see him, to see her, like I couldn't handle the truth?" "Because I didn't want to lose you," she said, and I could see the fear plain on her face, and I didn't trust myself not to screw it up again. "I thought if I told you everything, you'd walk away, and I couldn't bear that, not after everything you'd already given me." "You did lose me," I said, not cruel, just honest. "For a while there, I wasn't sure I'd ever come back, and maybe I'm still not, but Kara, I can't walk away from her." "I know," she whispered, "and I wouldn't want you to." We sat there in the silence of that car, a silence that didn't hurt this time, that felt like a shared wound finally starting to close, and after a while I said, "What about Caleb?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is he still part of this?" I asked. "You said you weren't getting back together, but is that true, or just another soft lie you're telling yourself so it hurts less when it falls apart?" She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the hem of her coat. "It's over with him, Jake, it's been over for a long time, even before you and I got serious, but, when it comes to Ava, he'll always be there, and I need you to be okay with that." "I don't need him to disappear," I said, "I just need you to be clear with me, about everything, always." "I can do that," she said, "I will." And for the first time in what felt like years, I let myself believe her. We didn't kiss, didn't hold hands or make promises we couldn't keep, we just sat there like 2 people trying to figure out if love could survive truth, and I realized that this was what it was supposed to feel like when something was real. Messy. Uncomfortable. But honest. That night, I drove back to the small apartment I'd been subletting since I left Kara's place and did something I hadn't done in months. I unpacked. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. A few shirts in the closet, a photo frame I hadn't touched since the move, the one Kara gave me during our first Christmas together, back when things were simple and stupid and sweet. And then I sat on the floor, staring at it, wondering how many lives we get to live in one lifetime, how many times we can break and still come back to something better. Maybe not perfect, but possible. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a man who had lost everything. I felt like a man who still had a choice. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The next few weeks felt like some kind of dream I wasn't sure I was allowed to stay in, like I'd snuck into someone else's life by mistake, and any minute now someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "You don't belong here," but I kept showing up anyway, every Saturday, every chance Kara gave me, because Ava, our daughter, was becoming the one thing that made sense in a life that had spun so far out of control I could barely recognize it anymore. We went to the zoo once, and she rode on my shoulders the whole afternoon, pointing at giraffes and asking questions I couldn't answer fast enough. We built cardboard castles on Kara's living room floor, ate too much popcorn watching old cartoons, and every time she fell asleep in my arms on the couch, I felt like I was holding something I never thought I'd get back, a future, maybe even a second chance at being the man I should have been from the start. Kara and I kept things light, mostly, but it was impossible not to feel the shift between us, the way her eyes lingered a little longer than before, the way we talked late into the night after Ava went to bed, laughing about nothing and sometimes crying about things that still hurt more than we admitted. We weren't a couple again, not exactly, but we were close, like two people standing at the edge of something they both want but are still afraid to name. Then one night, Kara invited me to dinner, not just the usual takeout on the couch while Ava colored in the corner, but a real meal, her cooking, candles on the table, music playing low in the background. I should have known it wasn't just dinner. "So," she said after we finished eating, her voice careful, "there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." I looked up from my plate, heart immediately on alert. "Okay, shoot." "It's about Ava," she said, and already I felt the knot forming in my chest, "about something I've been keeping from you." The air went still, even the music seemed to fade. She took a breath, looked me straight in the eyes. "Ava has a heart condition." Everything inside me went quiet. "What?" I asked, my voice barely there. It's not dangerous right now," she said quickly. "It's something she was born with," a small murmur, "and her pediatrician says it's manageable, but she'll need regular monitoring, and maybe surgery when she's older." I leaned back, trying to process it. "And you didn't think I should know that?" I asked, my voice rising before I could stop it. "You didn't think her father had a right to that information?" "I wanted to tell you," she said, her eyes full of guilt. "I did, but you weren't around, Jake, and then when you came back, everything was so fragile, I didn't want to scare you off again." "That's not your decision to make," I said, not yelling, just hurt, just deeply, profoundly hurt. "I could have been there, I should have been there, Kara." "I know," she whispered, "and I'm sorry, I really am, but now you do know, and you can be part of it, part of her care, part of the decisions moving forward." I stood up, walked to the window, tried to slow my breathing. My thoughts were a mess of fear and anger and confusion, but underneath it all was this one clear thought: she's sick, and I wasn't even given the chance to be scared sooner. That was the part that broke me the most. I turned back to her, my voice shaking. "I need to go. Jake, please. I just need time," I said, and left without another word. That night I didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't answer her messages. I just drove aimlessly through the city, trying to figure out what kind of man misses 5 years of his daughter's life and then gets angry at the one person who kept her alive and safe during that time. But I couldn't help it. I was angry, I was heartbroken, and more than anything, I was terrified. The next day, I sat outside the clinic Kara mentioned, staring at the building like it might swallow me whole. Eventually I went in, asked for the pediatric cardiology department, and explained who I was. The receptionist gave me a form, asked me to fill out my information so I could be listed as a secondary contact. I wrote my name with shaking hands. That's when it really hit me. I'm her father, not just in theory, not just in guilt or regret, but really, this was my seat at the table now, and it came with responsibility I couldn't run from, not ever again. I texted Kara that night. "I'm sorry for how I reacted. I want to know everything. I want to be there, for her, for you, for whatever comes next. Please don't shut me out." She replied within minutes. "I never wanted to. I was just afraid. But I'm glad you're here now. Ava needs you." "I do too." We met for coffee a few days later, neutral ground, no Ava, no expectations, just two people trying to patch the cracks in something they both still cared about. We talked for hours, about the doctors, the treatment plan, what might come next, and somewhere between all the medical terms and half-finished sentences, I realized how much she had carried alone, how much of her own life she'd buried just to give Ava a sense of normalcy. "You were right to be mad," she said eventually, "but Jake. I was doing the best I could with what I had." "I know," I said, and I meant it. "I just wish you'd let me carry some of that weight too." "You're here now," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "That's what matters." And maybe she was right. Maybe we don't get to undo the past, but we do get to choose who we are now. A few days later, I went with Kara to Ava's next appointment, sat beside her in the tiny room with the humming machines and the two white walls, held Ava's hand while they did the tests, made her laugh when she started to look scared, and when the doctor said her condition was stable for now, I think I breathed for the first time in days. Driving home, Ava fell asleep in the back seat, and Kara looked over at me and whispered, "You were amazing in there." I smiled, eyes on the road, heart still racing from it all. "She's the amazing one," I said, "I'm just trying to keep up." And in that quiet moment, I realized something else. I wasn't just trying to rebuild a relationship with Kara anymore. I was building something new, with Ava, with myself, with the man I was finally becoming. Not perfect, but present. And maybe, just maybe, that could be enough. Sometimes life gives you a window, just a small, quiet stretch of time, where things feel almost okay, like the storm has finally passed and you're standing on solid ground again, not perfect, not untouched, but whole enough to breathe without hurting. For me, those few weeks with Ava were that window. We developed a rhythm, something that resembled routine. I'd pick her up from school once a week, we'd spend Saturdays together, sometimes with Kara, sometimes just the two of us, building trust one laugh at a time. She started calling me Dad without hesitation, and every time she said it, I felt something crack and heal all at once. Kara and I, we were cautious, but closer, dinner together, long talks at night, touches that lingered, eyes that said more than either of us dared speak aloud. We never said we were together again, but we didn't need to, not really, not when we both knew what was happening. Then came the call. It was a Wednesday night. I was dead tired after work, lying on my mattress, barely awake, when my phone buzzed and lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe anyway. "Jake," a man's voice said, low, hesitant. "Yeah, who's this?" "It's Evan," he said, "Kara's brother." That got my attention. We'd only met once, briefly, back when Kara and I first got serious, but I remembered him, quiet guy, military posture, the kind of person who watches everything without saying much. "I know it's weird me calling," he continued, "but I thought you should know, something's going on, and you deserve to hear it from someone who doesn't want anything from you." I sat up, fully alert now. "What are you talking about?" "It's Kara," he said after a pause, "and Caleb. They're not done." "Not like she told you." My stomach twisted. "That's not true," I said without thinking. "She told me it was over, that they only talk because of Ava." "They've been seeing each other," he cut in, "not just talking, not just co-parenting, seeing each other. I saw them myself last weekend, coming out of the Amberlight Hotel, hand in hand." I went cold all over, gripped the phone tighter like I could squeeze the truth out of it. "I didn't know whether to tell you," he went on, "but you seem like you're really trying to be there for Ava, and I didn't think you deserved to be the last one to know." I hung up without saying goodbye, hands shaking, thoughts racing. I didn't want to believe him, I didn't, but something deep in me started to coil, that old instinct, the one I'd buried under every hopeful thought, every fragile second chance. The next day, I told Kara I was working late and couldn't pick up Ava. Then I followed her. It felt sick to even do it, but I had to know, I had to see for myself. She left work around 6, dressed too carefully for a casual night at home, not glamorously, no, but with that understated polish I'd come to recognize when she was nervous, when she wanted to feel in control of something. I trailed her from a distance, stayed back half a block, watched as she turned onto 8th Avenue and disappeared into the glass lobby of a mid-tier downtown hotel. Amberlight. She didn't come out. 30 minutes passed, then 45, then I saw him, Caleb, walking in like he belonged there, no hesitation, no guilt. I followed him through the rotating door, heart pounding, adrenaline making everything feel sharp and slow all at once. I ducked into the stairwell and took the stairs 2 at a time. Something in me knew what floor. 5th. I heard a door click shut before I reached the landing. I moved fast, looked down the hall, saw only one room with light under the door, number 514. I stood there, staring at it, hand halfway raised to knock, but I didn't. I leaned in close instead. Voices. Her laugh. His low murmur. I backed away like I'd touched something electric, something that burned even before it broke skin. I stumbled out of that hotel like I'd been punched in the gut, sat in my car, slammed the steering wheel, shouted once, short and hoarse, and just sat there breathing hard, the kind of breathing you do when you're trying not to fall apart in public. I don't remember driving home, don't remember the next hour, just remember sitting on my bed in the dark, holding one of Ava's drawings in my hand, and feeling like the universe was laughing in my face. I wanted to scream, to rage, to break everything in the room, but all I could do was stare at the crayon stick figure labeled, "Me and Daddy," and wonder what kind of man keeps getting fooled by the same woman over and over again. The next morning, Kara texted like nothing was wrong. "Missed you yesterday," Ava asked where you were, smiling face with smiling eyes. I stared at the screen so long it went black. I didn't reply. I didn't show up that Saturday. Or the one after that. On the third Saturday, she came to me. I opened the door to find her standing there with Ava holding her hand, confusion in both their eyes, worry in Kara's. "Jake," she said, "what's going on? Why are you ignoring us?" Ava looked up at me. "Did I do something bad?" That broke me in half. I knelt down, forced a smile, brushed her hair back gently. "No, sweetheart, never, it's not you, okay?" Kara watched us, her eyes softening, then hardening again as she pieced it together. "You know," she said. I didn't answer, just stood and stepped outside, closing the door behind me so Ava couldn't hear what came next. "Why?" I asked quietly, "After everything we've been through, after everything I've forgiven, why?" "It's not what you think," she said, eyes pleading. "That hotel, it wasn't." "Don't lie," I said sharply, "not now, not when it matters most." She looked down, shoulders collapsing in on themselves. "I was scared," she whispered. "I thought maybe I needed to try again with Caleb, for Ava's sake, to see if the family she came from could be whole again." "And?" I asked, "Did it feel whole in that hotel room?" She flinched, tears welling in her eyes. "It felt like a mistake, and I ended it, Jake, that night, I ended it for good." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But trust doesn't regenerate on command. "Do you love him?" I asked, the question that mattered more than all the others. She hesitated. That was my answer. I nodded slowly. "I can't do this again," I said, "not with you, not with someone who looks me in the eyes and chooses someone else the moment things get complicated." "What about Ava?" she asked, voice breaking. "She needs you, Jake." "I'll be there," I said firmly, "but only as her father, not as your fallback plan, not as your second try when the first one doesn't work out." She covered her mouth, nodded through tears, and whispered, "I'm sorry." But I was already walking away. This time, not from fear. Not from pain. But because I finally understood the cost of staying where I wasn't truly seen. And I wasn't going to pay it anymore. For the first time in months, I didn't know where I fit anymore. I wasn't with Kara. I wasn't exactly part of a family. But I wasn't alone either. Ava was still mine. And that meant everything. Still, those first days after confronting Kara felt like I was walking through a fog with a weight strapped to my chest. I'd stare at my phone for hours, half hoping she'd text again, half dreading that she would, but she didn't, and maybe that was for the best. I started seeing Ava on Sundays now, neutral ground, no Kara, just me and my daughter in parks, playgrounds, or the tiny library reading corner she loved more than any toy store, and honestly, those few hours with her were the only thing that made sense in a world that suddenly felt completely false again. One afternoon, we were sitting under a tree in the park. She was leaning against me, drawing a new picture, one with 3 stick figures this time, 2 adults and a little girl with curly yellow lines for hair, and for the first time, I asked, "Hey, Ava, do you know who your real dad is?" She looked up at me with those wide brown eyes that always cut through me. "You," she said, without hesitation, like it was the dumbest question I could have asked. My throat tightened. "I mean, you know Caleb, right? Mommy said he was your daddy too." She frowned, shrugged, went back to coloring. "He doesn't come anymore," she mumbled. "He says he's busy, he always says that." I didn't push, just wrapped an arm around her, but inside, I was boiling. He had time for Kara in hotel rooms. But not for this, not for her. The following week, I got a call from Kara's mom. We'd barely spoken in years, so the sound of her voice hit me like a memory I didn't expect. "I heard what happened," she said after some awkward catching up. "Kara told me everything." "I bet she has her version," I said, not bitter, just tired. "She always had a hard time letting go of Caleb," she admitted, "but she's paying for that now more than she ever has. Caleb's gone again, and this time for good." "I figured," I said flatly, "that's what he does." "She's not okay," her mother said, her voice quieter now. I don't say this to excuse anything, Jake, believe me, but I see her trying to hold it together for Ava, and she's falling apart instead. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't responsible for her anymore. But a small part of me still hated imagining her crying in silence, holding all her shame in the dark. She made her choice, I finally said, and I'm living with mine. And I was. I picked up extra shifts, started sleeping better, and I even applied for a new apartment, just a studio, but it had a window and a real door that locked properly. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and the thought of Ava having a space to call hers when she visited made every hour of overtime feel worth it. Then, one night, Kara showed up outside the warehouse where I worked, hair messy, sweater sleeves pushed up, no makeup, no filters, just her, raw and tired. I walked out to her, surprised, unsure. I just needed 5 minutes, she said, eyes glassy but determined. Can I talk to you? I nodded, still guarded, but curious despite myself. She didn't start with an apology this time. She started with the truth. I thought Caleb would make things easier, she said, that maybe going back to something familiar would fix everything that felt broken in me. I didn't say anything, just waited. But it didn't, she continued. He's still the same, absent, selfish, and when I told him about Ava's heart condition, he said, I hope your insurance covers it, and left. I flinched. That was 2 weeks ago, she said, wiping her face. He hasn't called since. Karma, I muttered, unable to stop myself. She almost smiled, then nodded, maybe, but it doesn't fix the mess I made with you. I crossed my arms, looking away. No, it doesn't. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, I just wanted you to know I'm done chasing ghosts. I looked at her for a long time, trying to read what was real in her and what was just guilt wearing sincerity's face. Good, I said simply, and turned to go back inside. She grabbed my arm gently. Wait, can I ask you something? I didn't move. If something ever happened to me, would you take Ava? She asked, voice shaking now, like really take her, raise her, protect her. I turned to face her, stunned. What are you talking about? I asked, is something wrong? She shook her head quickly. No, it's not that. It's just that I don't sleep well anymore, Jake, not since the diagnosis, and I think about her all the time, about the future, about what happens if I fail her completely. I just needed to know if I'm not alone in this. You're not, I said, instantly, from the gut, no hesitation. You never were, Kara, you just kept pushing me away. She nodded slowly, tears falling freely now. I know, and I'm sorry, more than I'll ever be able to say. That night, I sat in my car long after she left, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry anymore. Just tired. And strangely, calm. I wasn't in love with Kara, not anymore. But I still cared, in a way that hurt and healed at the same time. Because we shared something no affair, no betrayal, no hotel room could ever undo. We made Ava. And that little girl deserved the best of both of us, even if we'd failed each other. I started therapy a week later, found a community center that offered it for free. It wasn't magic, but it helped me untangle years of self-blame, poverty scars, abandonment issues I didn't even realize I carried. I told my story there. Not the polished version. The real one. And for the first time in years, someone listened without flinching. Meanwhile, Ava started leaving little notes in my pocket when I dropped her off. One said, "You're the best dad because you always come back." I kept that one in my wallet. Read it every time I doubted myself. One Sunday, while she was coloring, she looked up at me and said, "Daddy, when I grow up, can I live with you forever?" I laughed, choked a little, and said, "You can live wherever your heart is, sweet pea, and mine's always with you." Kara and I still speak. We're not friends, exactly. But we're something better than enemies. We're parents. And that has to be enough. At least for now. Because some wounds don't need to close to stop bleeding. They just need to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, one day healed by the person who finally stayed long enough to help. It had been nearly 6 months since Kara showed up outside my job. 6 months of steady Sundays with Ava, of overtime shifts I didn't resent, of quiet evenings in my studio apartment where the silence didn't feel like punishment anymore. I wasn't rich. I wasn't even close. But I was stable, and after everything I'd lost, that felt like a miracle I never saw coming. Kara kept her distance mostly. We had a routine now, text messages about Ava's appointments, school stuff, art projects, a random fever, and the occasional photo of Ava dressed like a princess or covered in paint, smiling like the world hadn't cracked around her at all. Then came the knock on my door that Saturday morning. A soft, unsure tap that made me think of the way Kara used to knock when she came home late. I opened the door and there she was. Hair in a braid, face pale, eyes tired, not the dramatic entrance she used to love. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside. She sat down at my little kitchen table and took a deep breath, like she'd practiced this moment 100 times. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice low, "and I need you to hear the whole thing before you react." I didn't sit. I just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, waiting. She took out her phone, unlocked it, then slid it across the table toward me. "Read the last few messages with Caleb." I hesitated, then picked it up and started scrolling. It was worse than I expected. He hadn't just left. He'd threatened her. He'd blamed her for Ava's condition, for his business failing, for trapping him in the past, his words, not mine. One message said, "You deserve to lose her. And you will." Another, "I should have taken that kid and disappeared when I had the chance." My stomach twisted as I read. I looked up at her, stunned. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked, voice tight. "You let me think it was just cheating, just weakness." "Because I was ashamed," she whispered, "because I invited him back into our lives, Jake, and then he turned it into something ugly, dangerous." I sat down, finally, needing the chair more than I wanted to admit. "Kara, is he still around?" "No," she said quickly. "I filed a restraining order." "He's gone, disappeared again, probably overseas. He has people who help him vanish when things get messy." I closed my eyes, tried to breathe through the new weight pressing down on my chest. "And Ava?" I asked. "She doesn't know." She shook her head. "I told her he moved away for work." I didn't want to scare her, not yet, not until I had to. I nodded slowly, torn between rage and relief. "So, what now? Why tell me this now?" She hesitated, then looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for a long time, fear, but also hope. "I've been offered a job in Seattle," she said. "It's a real opportunity, Jake, steady income, benefits, a safer neighborhood, good schools." I blinked, unsure where this was going. "I want you to come with us," she said, "not with me, with Ava, as her father, as her constant, if you want that." I froze. It was everything I thought I wanted. A chance to be in Ava's life full-time. To leave behind the city where I'd slept in my car, where I'd fallen apart, where I'd watched love decay like a forgotten fruit in the back of the fridge. But it also meant giving Kara another piece of me. It meant trusting her again. And I didn't know if I could. "You'd really go?" I asked. "Just start over?" She nodded. "I have to, Jake, for Ava, for myself, and maybe for you too, if you want it." I didn't answer right away. She left after that, didn't push, didn't beg. Just dropped that bomb and walked away like it weighed nothing. But it followed me all week. I kept picturing Ava waking up in a strange new place, scared, without me. I pictured Kara working some long office job, eating alone in a cold apartment while our daughter asked questions neither of us were ready to answer. I pictured myself, standing at another fork in the road, again, unsure which direction would break me more. Then something strange happened. Ava got sick. Not just a cold, fever, fainting, blue lips, another ER visit that shook us both. I rushed there the moment Kara called. We sat side by side in a too-bright hospital room, watching Ava sleep with wires attached to her little chest and beeping machines reminding us just how fragile this whole thing really was. "She needs the surgery," Kara said quietly, "the one we postponed last year. It's time." I nodded, my throat dry. "Then we do it, no more waiting." "She's scared," she whispered, eyes wet. She asked me if she was dying. I looked at my daughter, her cheeks flushed, her hand curled loosely around a stuffed bunny that had seen better days. "She's not dying," I said firmly, "not on my watch." And I meant it. When we brought her home, I didn't leave. I stayed on the couch, brought her juice, read stories, rubbed her back when she whimpered in her sleep. Kara didn't ask questions. She just let me be there, and that was enough. Then one night, When Ava was finally asleep upstairs, Kara sat next to me, and for a long time, we didn't speak. She broke the silence first. "You always show up." I shrugged. "It's not a superpower, Kara, it's what you do when you love someone." She looked at me then, eyes red but clear. "Do you still love me?" The question sat between us like a live wire. I thought about all the versions of her I'd known, the dreamer, the liar, the fighter, the woman who saved me from the street and the one who broke my heart in the same breath. And I realized something important. "I love Ava," I said, "with everything I've got, and I'll always care about you, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back." She nodded slowly, not surprised, just sad. "That's okay," she said quietly, "I just needed to know where we stood." And for the first time, we finally did. When I left that night, I stood on the porch for a long time. The sky above was clear. The street was quiet. But inside me, a storm was finally settling. Seattle was still on the table. The surgery was scheduled for next month. And somewhere in all this chaos, I'd finally found something close to peace. Because no matter what happened next, I'd already made my choice. I was going to be the man Ava could always count on. Even if it meant letting go of the version of life I thought I needed to feel whole. The morning of Ava's surgery, the sky was gray, low clouds hugging the city like a warning. But inside that hospital room, something was different. There was no panic this time, no chaos. Just silence, deep and steady, like the kind you feel before a storm, but also before clarity. Ava was brave, braver than most adults I knew. She held my hand and whispered, "Daddy, are you gonna be there when I wake up?" And I bent down, kissed her forehead, and said, "I'll be the first face you see, sweetheart." And I meant it, with everything in me. Kara stood behind me, silent, hands clenched together so tightly I thought her fingers would snap. I looked at her and nodded once. There was nothing left to argue about, not now. We were a unit in that moment, fractured or not. When they wheeled Ava away, something inside me twisted. Like all the weight I'd carried finally decided to make itself known in one brutal knot deep in my chest. I sat in the waiting room for hours. Didn't drink water, didn't eat, just stared at the clock. Kara sat beside me, head on my shoulder like she used to do years ago, before everything broke. I don't remember falling asleep, but when the surgeon finally walked in and said the words, "She's stable, the surgery went well," I broke down. Right there in that sterile hallway, I cried like I hadn't since the day I lost my home. And Kara cried too, and for a second, it felt like maybe this was what rebuilding looked like. Not romance, not fairy tales. But two people who once wrecked each other now fighting for the same little soul. They let us in to see her. She was pale but breathing steady, her chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. Her tiny hand reached for mine, and I held it like it was made of glass. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. Her eyes met mine and that was enough. I stayed in that hospital for the next 3 days, slept in a chair, ate vending machine sandwiches. But I didn't leave her side. Not once. Kara did the same. We shared duties like divorced parents without the paperwork. One night, while Ava was asleep, Kara handed me a cup of coffee and sat beside me. Quiet for a while, then she said, "You're the strongest person I've ever known." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. Strong? I was homeless not long ago, Kara. I slept in a damn car with a ripped jacket and a busted heater. "That's why you're strong," she said, "because you got back up, you built something out of nothing." I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in a long time, I saw her, not the version I'd loved or hated. Just Kara, the woman who saved me once, then hurt me, then tried to fix what she could. And suddenly, I understood something I hadn't until right then. She was just as broken as I'd been. Maybe in different ways, but just as human, just as scared, just as desperate to feel whole. When we got the okay to take Ava home, it felt like walking out of prison into a field of light. She was still weak, but smiling. And when we got to Kara's place, she looked up at me from the back seat and said, "Can I stay with you for a while, Daddy? Just us?" Kara looked at me, startled, but didn't argue. She just said, "You'd like that, huh, bug?" And Ava nodded fast. And that's how it started. Just a week or two, then a month. Then suddenly Ava had a toothbrush at my place, clothes in a drawer, her drawings on my fridge. And when the lease renewal came around, I signed it with her favorite purple pen. One night, months later, after bedtime stories and blanket forts, I sat on the edge of the bed while she drifted off. And she mumbled, half asleep, "You're my home, Daddy." That was the moment it hit me. Not just emotionally, physically, like a jolt to the chest. I'd been searching so hard for meaning, for control, for revenge. But none of that had ever really mattered. This right here, was it. This was the choice. Not Kara, not the past, not even the betrayal. The choice was to love. To show up. To be present. Even when it hurt, even when it scared me, even when it meant letting go of what I thought I wanted. Kara eventually took the job in Seattle. She didn't pressure me to follow. She came to see Ava once a month, sometimes twice. We worked out a co-parenting plan that made sense, not just for us, but for her. Because she came first now, always. And one day, when Ava was older and ready, we told her the truth, gently, carefully. About Caleb, about how he left, about how her mother had made mistakes. And she cried, but she didn't break. She looked at me and asked, "Why didn't he want me?" And I said, "Because he didn't know you, and if he had, he never could have walked away." She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe, and whispered, "I'm glad I have you." And I whispered back, "Me too, baby girl, me too." Years passed. I didn't fall in love again, not in the way I thought I would. But I found peace. Real peace, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're willing to fight for. I watched Ava grow into the kind of girl who held the door for strangers, who comforted sad friends at school, who always had paint under her fingernails and hope in her smile. And every time she looked at me and called me Dad. Every single time. I knew I'd made the right choice. I lost everything once. My home, my pride, my trust. But I gained something bigger, something permanent. Not because someone saved me. But because when the time came, I chose to stand. To stay. To love without needing anything back. And in the end, that made me more than a survivor. It made me whole.